Welcome back to the Wargrove of Woe. In today's video, we're going to be doing the part 3 of my Army Playstyle series. In part 3, we're going to be focusing on the Grand Alliance Destruction. Now, before we get started, I'd like to apologize for the lack of uploads lately. I've been very busy. I had some family come up to visit, as well as a few midterms that I had to study for and take. The midterms went well. I got a high enough grade that I was wanting, and seeing my family was nice. So hopefully, with my schedule kind of smoothing out, we should be resuming regular content like every other day or something along those lines. But with that out of the way, a few other bookkeeping things to talk about for Grand Alliance Destruction. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to be breaking up the 4 different Orc war clans and talking about their playstyle separately because they all play very differently. So I will be covering the Ironjaws, Cruel Boys, Bone Splitters, and Big Wah separately. So they will each have their own separate section. But without further ado, let's get started. So, as with the other previous videos, this is my table of primary playstyles and playstyle modifiers. Each army in the game generally falls into one of 3 basic playstyles, either aggressive, defensive, or movement, or some other categorization that you see in the basic playstyle categories. And then alongside those basic playstyles, they take on different modifiers that kind of help flesh out and make them who they are. So a faction can be slow or fast, tanky, squishy, low model count, high model count. Where do they get a lot of value from? Heroes, monsters, or infantry? And where do they kind of get their damage output? Is it magic, in melee combat, or is it ranged? Or is the faction a generalist faction that can do a whole bunch of the above? I have tried to the best of my abilities to apply all these modifiers in the correct order to each faction. If you disagree with some of my analysis, please let me know down in the comments, and I'd be interested to see your thoughts. First up in Grand Alliance Destruction is Gloomspite Gits. These poor little mushroom goblins are in a little bit of a rough spot, and so they kind of need to be played a little bit more carefully than some of the other destruction factions. So I give the Gloomspite Gits a Rush Finesse primary playstyle. For the most part, all destruction armies have a very similar run at them mentality. And so rush and aggression is the big thing for destruction. But since Gloomspite has some fairly weak rules, the player needs to be a little bit more careful and have some finesse with their army to succeed at Gloomspite. But with that in mind, Gloomspite Gits is a generally speaking horde infantry-centric squishy army. They like to field big blobs of gobos or big blobs of squigs and go at them. Now, this is not the 100% case. There is some builds with a troll army and using only like Troggoths and all of that jazz. But generally speaking, you're going to have a lot of bodies, and they're going to be mostly infantry. But there are different ways to play Gloomspite other than squigs and gobos. Next up is the Ogre Mod Tribes. Now, Ogre Mod Tribes have a primarily aggressive playstyle. They like to charge in there and just crush up some stuff. They are very elite, generally speaking. Their models are expensive and they have a low model count. I'd say that Ogre Mod Tribes probably has the 2nd lowest model count in all of the armies in Age of Sigmar. Behind, of course, Sons of Bihar, which we will get over last. But with that aside, the Ogre Mod Tribes are a monster-centric, elite, martial-focused army. So they get a lot of value out of their big monsters and kind of charging and barreling over the enemy. So if that sounds like fun to you, then pick up some Ogre Mod Tribe units. First of the 4 different Orc armies is the Ironjaws. Just to clarify, the battle tome you see in the picture to the right is very old. It's just like 1st edition, maybe even like 0.5 edition. It's incredibly old, but it's there just to provide some context, so I don't use the current 3rd edition Ogre Mod Tribe, not Ogre Mod Tribes, Orc War Clans picture 3 times. Ironjaws are insanely powerful right now. They are probably the 1st or 2nd strongest orc clan, in my opinion. The Ironjaws are an incredibly aggressive and rush primary playstyle. They are fast, they are tanky, and they are somewhat elite martial focused army. The big units that you should really be looking at are the War Boss on Maw Crusher. Those meatballs are stupidly scary. I've been on the receiving end of some pretty bad meatball lists in the past, and it's kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. Ironjaws is very, very powerful, and if your opponent deploys wrong, you can win turn 1 with Ironjaws. So, just something to consider. Before we move on, I'd like to give an extra special thanks to our Patreon supporters. You guys are amazing. If the Patreon continues to grow at the rate that it has, I would be astounded to start doing content and YouTube full time. It would be a dream come true. So if you'd like to see that happen or would like to support me on that journey, please go check out the Patreon link in the description below. And an extra special thanks to Nick Hoff. The next Orc War Clan is the Cruel Boys. This is the latest addition to the Orcs, and they are, very oddly enough, a defensive or castle playstyle, which you wouldn't expect an Orc to be, but these guys are extra cunning, you see. And so the Cruel Boys tend to be a slow, ranged focus army. They want to shoot you as much as they can and then just kind of walk on to objectives. They work well with lots of bow boys and the war boss on Slogoth, and just shooting out a lot of mortal wounds. You're really fishing for 6s to hit on these guys. So if you want a very unique orc army, definitely give Cruel Boys a try. Next up is Bone Splitters. Same with the Ironjaws. The picture is just for placeholder. Now, out of the 3 orc armies or sub-factions, I guess you could consider them, I know the least about Bone Splitters. I've never seen a Bone Splitter army. I don't know if that's because they are weak or if their models are just a little old looking or a little dated, but yeah, Bone Splitters are a little bit of an oddity. Now, because of my lack of exposure to them, I might be getting their playstyle a little skewed, but generally speaking, just on face value, they seem to be a finesse rush primary playstyle. This is mostly because they are fairly squishy and they like to take a lot of bodies. They are cheaper than Ironjaws, and I think they're cheaper than most Cruel Boys as well, so you can field more of them. So if you like the half-naked orcs running down the field, maybe check out the Bone Splitters. Next up is Big Waaagh. Now Big Waaagh, as it sounds, is just kind of a combination of any of the 3 above. If you just want to bring some Ironjaws, some Cruel Boys, or some Bone Splitters, then you're going to be doing Big Waaagh. Now Big Waaagh, because of its nature as a kind of ally coalition army, it tends to be a little bit more carefully played, so I give it an aggressive finesse primary playstyle. And because of the vast different armies that you can make and the vast different war scrolls you have access to in Big Waaagh, there's no other tag than generalist to give the Big Waaagh. It is just kind of, you can build whatever you'd like with Big Waaagh. You can lean into one of the 3 and kind of shift your army's playstyle more in that direction, or you can split it evenly and have a very, very kind of split general faction. But it's a very interesting one, and I'd be curious to see what your guys' thoughts are on Big Waaagh. Last but most certainly not least is the Sons of Behemoth. Some consider Sons of Behemoth the best army in Age of Sigmar right now, or at least it used to be before Stormcast Dragons. They are definitely up there in terms of their raw power, and that mostly comes down to the fact that their entire army is monster-based, or it is very... the current Age of Sigmar 3.0 caters very heavily to them and to how their army is constructed. So just off of the core rules really favoring them, they they succeed very, very well. Sons of Behemoth are a very simple army. They are very aggressive, and they are a tanky, elite, monster-centric army. I have no doubt in my mind that this is the most elite army in Age of Sigmar. For kind of some context, the equivalent for 40k is Imperial or Chaos Knights. So if you like Knights from 40k, this is going to be similar. It might not have the same aesthetic of Noble Knights. It's rather the opposite of kind of barbarian style units and giants, but same concept. You have like two big models surrounded by a bunch of little or not little, but medium-sized giants. Most Sons of Behemoth armies are like 5 models. So if you don't like painting a lot of small infantry models, get Sons of Behemoth. Sure, their individual models are expensive in real money, but you don't need many of them. You need just a few. And that was the different army playstyles for Grand Alliance Destruction. I would love to hear your thoughts down in the description below on the various tags that I gave the destruction armies. I feel that for the most part, I did pretty well. All of them play vaguely similar, being destruction and just kind of wanting to run in and hit things. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like or a comment. And if you'd like to see more types of videos like this in the future, please consider subscribing. This has been the Wargrove of Woe, and I'll talk to you guys next time.